Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to this special briefing on Prime Minister's visit to attend the 10th BRICS Summit and other related meetings in Johannesburg. Earlier today, Prime Minister attended the restricted session and the plenary session of the BRICS Summit. To give you more details about his meeting and what transpired today, I have with me Secretary Economic Relations, Shri T.S. Tirumurti. I also have Joint Secretary Multilateral Economic Relations, Alok, Dimri, and Secretary will brief you all on Prime Minister's program today.
Friends, Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi attended the 10th BRICS Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. And this is his 5th summit. And with this, he has attended practically all the BRICS summits in the last 5 years. BRICS, as you know, brings together 5 major economies, comprising 42% of the world population and 23% of the world GDP. South Africa has organized the 10th BRICS Leaders Summit under the theme BRICS in Africa, Collaboration for Inclusive Growth and Shared Prosperity in the 4th Industrial Revolution. You'll recall that India hosted the 8th summit in Goa and the 4th one in New Delhi. This morning, the Honorable Prime Minister participated in the BRICS Leaders Restricted Session and then the plenary session. I'll try and give you a sense of the points which the Prime Minister made during his interventions. Prime Minister expressed his happiness to be in Madiba's land, the land of the great leader Nelson Mandela, during his birth centenary celebrations. The Prime Minister highlighted the challenges faced by multilateralism and rules-based international order. In the midst of uncertainty, he mentioned that BRICS stands like a rock of stability and development. However, the Prime Minister emphasized that the Prime Minister emphasized that the objective of preserving multilateralism and the multilateral world order is not to maintain the status quo. He reminded the leaders that BRICS came together 10 years ago for change and for reform of the world order. Therefore, he said, what we need today is reformed multilateralism, not going back to the status quo of multilateralism. In this context, he also stressed the importance of UN Security Council reforms. The Prime Minister called for BRICS cooperation for global, portable, social security framework for the benefit of nearly 250 million strong workforce who are working outside their own countries. He also stressed the key role for trade liberalization. And as regards trade, he mentioned about a just, open and transparent system with the WTO as the center. And he also referred to aspects relating to startups, skilling, digital infrastructure, etc. The Prime Minister also recalled the BRICS common understanding reached on countering terrorism adopted during the various past summits, particularly in Goa and in Xiamen. And he referred to terrorism, extremism as the biggest threats. In this context, you may have already seen the joint declaration adopted by the leaders. Terrorism, as you can see, features prominently in the declaration, and the BRICS leaders deplore terrorism in all forms and manifestations, and recall the responsibility of all states to prevent the menace of terrorist networks and actions from their respective territories. They have called for the early finalization of the CCIT, and the leaders have also called for a comprehensive approach to countering radicalization, recruitment and travel of foreign terrorist fighters, and leaders have called for implementation of FATF standards on financing of terrorism and proliferation. These are some of the aspects, and they also called for blocking of sources of terrorist finance. The Prime Minister, in his statements, called for keeping people at the heart of development. And in this regard, he stressed that in order to prepare for the impact of the fourth industrial revolution, and skill development and educational policies will have to be suitably adjusted. He indicated that technology could cause the biggest disruptions. The Prime Minister called for increased BRICS cooperation on fourth industrial revolution and called for exchange of best practices and policies. He further suggested that the respective ministers and experts from BRICS countries should work together in this regard. As regards the Johannesburg Declaration itself, I'll read out a few salient points which it has, just to give you a sense of what the leaders discussed during the various interactions which took place both in the restricted session and in the plenary. You will see that the joint declaration reaffirms the principles which includes democracy and inclusiveness. In fact, democracy has been included in the list of principles for the first time. The leaders have underlined the centrality of the UN Charter, respect for international law and the rule of law. And they have, as I mentioned before, expressed their support for a multilateral role and for a democratic global order. And they have also underlined commitments in a various range of areas. But before I come to that, let me also say that one of the highlights of the joint declaration is their stand on corruption. And in the context of corruption and anti-corruption, in fact, they have mentioned about cooperation in law enforcement, extradition of fugitives, economic and corruption offenders, and asset recovery. As regards the people-to-people developments and the people-centric vision which the Prime Minister put forward in Fortaleza, we are extremely heartened to know that many of the initiatives which Prime Minister and India had put forward has been taken forward. In fact, during South Africa's own presidency, they have held the third BRICS Film Festival. The third BRICS Games is in the offing, and they have also established, as you know, a BRICS Sports Council, the BRICS Joint Task Force on Disaster Management, which was launched, and you recall the Udaipur Declaration, and that is also being taken forward, and BRICS Joint Action Plan has been adopted. The Women's Parliamentarian Forum finds mention, and strengthening of the BRICS Agriculture Research Platform, which was initiated by India, and this also finds mention. So apart from these, the joint declaration also calls for the full implementation of the SDGs on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It expresses support for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and, of course, the principles of CBDR and as well as the Conference of Parties to 24. It also envisages cooperation between the BRICS national park authorities. It emphasizes the importance of blue and ocean economy. It calls for IMF reforms and, of course, the conclusion of the 15th round by spring 2019. It touches on some of the hotspots. It finds mention in the joint declaration that all the leaders, the priority they give for Africa. Tomorrow we'll have the retreat, and we'll also have the the BRICS outreach with many of the leaders from Africa and other countries attending. And at this point, allow me to just conclude by saying that India is extremely satisfied with the BRICS achievement in the last 10 years, and a decade of BRICS gives us an opportunity to reflect on where we are and to also focus on further consolidation. And we are confident that the retreat will give us an opportunity to take BRICS forward. Thank you.